Live from New Delhi, you're watching the India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, coming up in the next hour. Vladimir Putin wins Russian presidential polls for record fifth term, says ready for talks on French proposal for a Ukraine ceasefire during the Olympics. Commenting on Navalny's death for first time, Putin says he supported prisoner exchange for him. Israel and Hamas are expected to resume stalled ceasefire talks in Qatar, even as Netanyahu remains adamant on going ahead with Rafah assault plan. North Korea launches multiple ballistic missiles as South hosts a summit of democracy. Japan terms North Korean action unacceptable, saying it will further advance close trilateral cooperation with the US and South Korea. Campaigning picks up for India's general elections. PM Modi to campaign in southern states of the country. Election Commission asks political parties to refrain from personal attacks. And in tennis, Alcaraz beats Medvedev to win second straight Indian Wells title in women's single. Swiatek crushes Sakari to win second title. On to the details now. President Vladimir Putin has extended his rule over Russia until 2030, winning the presidential election with around 88% votes. With a landslide victory, Putin cemented his already tight grip on power and said he never promises anything he cannot fulfill. Putin told supporters in a victory speech in Moscow that Russia has all the conditions to become stronger. The outcome means 71-year-old Putin is set to embark on a new 6-year term that will see him overtake Joseph Stalin and become Russia's longest-serving leader for more than 200 years if he completes it. Dasha Chernyshova tells us more from Moscow.
Спасибо. Спасибо большое.
Vladimir Putin secured another presidential term with a landslide victory. After the announcement of preliminary results by the Russian electoral authorities, Vladimir Putin said that they were a proof of the Russian people's trust. Speaking at his election headquarters in Gostinny Dvor in Moscow, he said Russia will remain strong no matter who wants to suppress it. Putin thanked all Russian citizens who voted in the election and emphasized that the source of power in Russia is its people. He linked the high turnout in the election, which exceeded the expected 70%, with the fact that Russians understand that their voices matter, as their country, quote, is defending its development. Commenting on the West's reaction to the election in Russia, Putin said it was expected as the Western countries fight with Moscow and want to spur its development. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that Putin had no time to celebrate his victory. Moscow accused Ukraine of attempting to derail presidential election by stepping up attacks against Russian regions, and the West of encouraging certain individuals to extremism in Russia, as there were attempts to spoil ballots and set fire at the polling stations. Dasha Chernyshova reporting in Moscow for DD India.
Also, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Russia was ready for talks on a French proposal for a ceasefire in Ukraine during the Olympic Games on Monday. Putin was speaking at his election headquarters in Moscow.
I do not know about this statement of France's president. We are ready to discuss any issues, but as always, within any situation, we will proceed from the interests of the Russian Federation and, of course, the situation at the front line.
Putin was also wary about to whom it could talk to about the possibility of peace in Ukraine. His statement suggested that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was not an option for the peace talks. Putin did not rule out the possibility that Russia would have to create a sanitary zone to prevent further attacks in Ukraine-controlled areas.
I do not rule out that, bearing in mind the tragic events taking place today, we will be forced at some point, when we deem it appropriate, to create a certain sanitary zone in the current territories subordinate to the Kyiv regime, to create a security zone that will be quite difficult to cross with a means of destruction that the enemy is using, primarily, of course, of foreign manufacture.
Also, Putin had agreed to a prisoner swap involving opposition leader Alexei Navalny before his death in prison last month. He disclosed this information while adding that the main condition for the exchange was that Navalny would not return to Russia.
A few days before Mr. Navalny passed away, some colleagues told me, not members of the presidential administration, that there was an idea to exchange Mr. Navalny for some people who are imprisoned in Western countries. You may believe me, you may not. The person who spoke to me hadn't finished his sentence yet, and I said, I agree. But unfortunately, what happened is what happened. On one condition only, I said, we will change it so he doesn't come back, let him sit there. But things happen. There's nothing you can do about it.
An update now on Israel-Hamas conflict. Gaza ceasefire talks are expected to resume in Qatar. The talks would mark the first time both Israeli officials and Hamas leaders join the indirect negotiations since the start of the Muslim holy month of Ramzan. International mediators had hoped to secure a 6-week truce before Ramzan started earlier last week, but Hamas refused any deal that would not lead to a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, a demand Israel rejected. However, both sides have made moves in the past few days aimed at getting the talks. Also, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reaffirmed his determination to launch an offensive in Rafah. Netanyahu told a cabinet meeting on Sunday that Israel would push into Rafah, the last relatively safe place in Gaza after more than 5 months of conflict. He, however, said Israel will not leave civilians trapped in Rafah when its forces begin assault on the southern Gaza city.
Our goal in eliminating the remaining terrorist battalions in Rafah goes hand in hand with enabling the civilian population to leave Rafah. It's not something that we will do while keeping the population locked in place. In fact, we'll do the very opposite. We'll enable them to leave because our consideration for reducing and minimizing civilian casualties has guided us and will continue to guide us in the future.
And German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met Israeli Prime Minister in Jerusalem on Sunday. Speaking after talks, Scholz said he had shared his concerns about the civilian casualties and insufficient aid reaching Gaza. At a joint news conference with Netanyahu, Scholz said he spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about the need to provide comprehensive humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza.
We cannot stand by and watch Palestinians risk starvation. That's not us. That is not what we stand for together. Much more humanitarian aid is needed continuously, reliably. I shared my concerns with the Prime Minister that provision of aid from Israel into Gaza and the conditions for distribution must be urgently and massively improved.
And European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called for a rapid ceasefire agreement in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. The European Commission President was speaking to media in Cairo after signing a strategic partnership agreement with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
We are all extremely concerned about the war in Gaza and the unfolding catastrophic humanitarian situation. Gaza is facing famine, and we cannot accept this. It is critical to achieve an agreement on a ceasefire rapidly now that frees the hostages and allows more humanitarian aid to reach Gaza.
Well, the World Health Organization's regional director, Hanan Balkhi, visited Gaza's aid warehouses in Egypt's Arish and Rafah border crossing on Sunday. Balkhi, who also checked on medical evacuees from Gaza receiving treatment in Arish Hospital, said that more assistance is needed in treating the injured civilians, especially the complicated cases. She also called for a swift ease to the land borders of Gaza for more aid to get inside.
We need more support, we need more aid, especially for the complicated treatments like cancer, chronic diseases. We hope that there will be a swift easing, especially for the land borders, because there are land, air and seaports. The most beneficial for the residents of the occupied lands to have the land ports facilitated and eased. God willing, all of these things will happen soon, and we hope for quick peace for this problem.
Meanwhile, the Israeli army has announced on Monday an operation is underway in Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital. IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said the operation is based on intelligence information indicating the use of the hospital by senior Hamas terrorists.
The IDF is conducting a high-precision operation in limited areas of Shifa Hospital, following concrete intelligence that demanded immediate action. We know that senior Hamas terrorists have regrouped inside the Shifa Hospital and are using it to command attacks against Israel. Our targeted mission isn't just an operational necessity, it's a global imperative. Our forces have undergone specified training to prepare them for the sensitive environment and complex scenarios they may encounter. Our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza. We seek no harm to the civilians that Hamas is hiding behind, which is why we will conduct this operation with caution and care, while ensuring that the hospital continues its important functions.
And shifting focus, U.S. President Joe Biden and his predecessor Donald Trump took aim at each other in speeches delivered over the weekend as the two men prepare for a widely expected rematch for the White House. Mr. Biden questioned his rival's mental fitness, while Mr. Trump predicted a bloodbath if he lost in November. Our Washington correspondent Jagrati Dave has more on this.
One candidate is too old and mentally unfit to be president. The other is me. This is what Joe Biden joked to an international audience of journalists and politicians at a historic dinner here in Washington, D.C. that's been taking place for more than 130 years now. Now, Joe Biden, the 81-year-old Democrat, is himself facing questions about his own age and mental proficiency. So he took the opportunity to mock his Republican rival Donald Trump for his recent gaffes on the campaign trail, which have included apparently confusing Joe Biden for Barack Obama. Now, Donald Trump, meanwhile, called Joe Biden a stupid president in front of an audience at a rally in Ohio. He also made dark predictions about a bloodbath and the end of meaningful elections if he lost the race in November. Now, he also used offensive language about some migrants, saying that they're not people, in my opinion, and later called them animals. Now, the Biden campaign has said that the bloodbath reference was hinting at political violence. The Donald Trump campaign said that the comments were taken out of context and said that Donald Trump was actually just referring to the downfall of the American car industry under the Biden administration. Jagrati Dave in Washington, reporting for DD India.
And still to come on DD India News Hour. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Seoul to attend the third Summit for Democracy hosted by President Yoon Suk Yeol. Protest against competition and bureaucracy continues in Spain by farmers as they block traffic with tractors. And high temperatures set a new record in Brazil's Rio. People flocked to beaches for respite. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Lepakshi Khurana, and moving on, North Korea fired multiple short-range ballistic missiles into the sea on Monday for the first time in 2 months. South Korea's military said the missiles were fired to the east of the Korean peninsula. Japan's Coast Guard also said that North Korea had fired what could be a ballistic missile, and the missile appears to have already fallen outside its exclusive economic zone area. North Korea's military has been conducting exercises using conventional weapons in recent weeks. The show of force by Pyongyang comes as the militaries of South Korea and the United States carried out large-scale annual joint military drills for 10 days, ending on last Thursday. Also, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida condemned the missile launch, saying North Korea's series of actions threaten the peace and security in the region and the international community and were absolutely unacceptable.
North Korea has repeatedly launched ballistic missiles quite often since the beginning of this year. A series of actions by North Korea threaten the peace and security of our country, the region and the international community and are absolutely unacceptable. The latest ballistic missile launch was a violation of related UN resolutions and we are strongly condemn it. We have already lodged a stern protest against North Korea.
And India correspondent Chris Gilbert from Tokyo tells us more about the launch and the reactions that followed.
As experts have pointed out multiple times, North Korea doesn't need any reason particularly to launch ballistic missiles. It is prone to do so whenever it wants. But there may be multiple reasons. Of course, as you mentioned, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Seoul for the Summit of Democracy today. It may be timed for that reason. We also saw last year North Korea launch ballistic missiles when its leader Kim Jong-un met with Vladimir Putin in East Russia. So it may be also in response to North Korea's ally Russia and Putin winning re-election there just the other day. So there may be multiple reasons, but the main reason usually is that they test these missiles to defend themselves against what's perceived as acts of aggression from South Korea and the US. Operation Freedom Shield has just wrapped up in the region. There is a Summit for Democracy going on. We will learn the exact reason likely on Tuesday. The state media usually gives a release the day after these events happen, so we may learn more in the coming days.
Well, the missile launch comes at a time when U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Seoul to attend the 3rd Summit for Democracy hosted by President Yoon Suk Yeol. Speaking at the opening of the summit, Blinken said technology should be employed to sustain democratic values in the face of efforts by authoritarian and repressive regimes to deploy technology to undermine democracy and human rights. He also highlighted that democracy is the single most powerful tool for unleashing human potential. Talking about U.S. President, Blinken said that Joe Biden has made defense of democracy a core pillar of American diplomacy. The 3-day summit brings together government officials, NGOs, and civil society members.
We also need to show that democracy is responsive to our people's needs and can deliver on the issues that matter most in their lives and for their livelihoods, like the climate crisis, which for millions of people is literally an existential threat to their livelihoods today. Inclusive economic growth that protects the dignity of work and strengthens the economic competitiveness of democracies. Social rights, like food, healthcare, education, housing. The rights and needs of the vulnerable and historically marginalized, women and girls, people living with disabilities, the LGBTQI+ community, religious and ethnic minorities, young people. Our democracy cannot be for some. It must be for all.
And Chris Gilbert also tells us more about what to look forward on the Blinken Seoul visit.
Secretary of State Blinken is certainly going to raise that with his counterpart in South Korea. They are having a bilateral meeting today on the sidelines of that summit, and that it's going to specifically address the threats from North Korea and the escalations on the peninsula, specifically since both countries began disassembling, de-escalating agreements that were put in place in 2018. So that will be high on the agenda, but he's already made opening remarks for the summit, and that has focused very much on protecting democracy as he sees around the world. He congratulated Canada on the work that it has done preventing money laundering. He congratulated his own country, the United States, for the work it has done protecting public media interests around the world. But he has said that democracy has had some backslides in recent years, not naming any names in particular, but particularly in terms of corruption around the world. So those talks with his counterpart are coming up later today, and no doubt we'll have some more announcements on the enhancing military drills between these two countries going forward.
And Colombia will suspend its months-long ceasefire with the Estado Mayor Central Armed Group in 3 provinces on Wednesday, citing incidents of violence that broke the ceasefire. The EMC began talks with President Gustavo Petro's government last year in a bid to end its part in Colombia's 60 years of war. The announcement of the end of the ceasefire did not mention any effect on the overall negotiations. Violence in many parts of Colombia has continued despite ongoing bilateral government ceasefires, such as that with the EMC. The ceasefire with the EMC went into place last October with a January deadline before being extended through July 15th. However, a major leader of the EMC said that it would be difficult to reach a peace deal before the end of Petro's term in 2026 and that it would need the support of wider Colombian civil society to be successful. And in Spain, thousands of farmers once again protested with tractors in Madrid on Sunday, demanding better prices for their produce and denouncing European Union agricultural policies. Beginning early on Sunday morning, farmers from different communities have been traveling towards Madrid, causing traffic problems. The farmers marched after the EU proposed legislative changes to ease the environmental rules of the Common Agricultural Policy on Friday. The farmers argue that the EU's policies on the environment and other matters are a financial burden and make their products more expensive than non-EU imports. Spain's government has already made some concessions in an effort to placate the farmers, but agricultural groups have called those measures insufficient. An escalating armed conflict in Haiti has not only engulfed the country's capital city, Port-au-Prince, but also the neighboring Dominican Republic. The border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic has been closed for days, but on Thursday and Friday, Haitians were allowed into the farmers' market in the border town of Dajabon under watchful eye of border guards. Many people are struggling to leave the violence-torn country, where anti-government gangs have already shut down Cap Haitien International Airport. The humanitarian crisis seems likely to grow more acute, especially if, as many fear, the Dominican government moves to seal the frontier. And hundreds in Cuba's second-largest city, Santiago, engaged in a rare public protest on Sunday with a chants of power and food. The demonstration prompted President Miguel Diaz-Canel to call for dialogue in an atmosphere of tranquility and peace. Blackouts in many parts of the country were extended for over 18 hours or more a day, jeopardizing frozen food and ratcheting up tensions on the island. Cuba has fallen into a near unprecedented economic crisis since the COVID-19 pandemic, with vast shortages of food, fuel and medicine, stoking a record-breaking exodus that has seen upwards of 400,000 people migrate to the United States. While southwest China's Sichuan grapples with blizzards of wildfire, thousands of people have been affected by blaze. 29 tents have been set up on the playground where 157 affected people have been shifted. The fire engulfed the steep slopes of the region, making it hard to transport firefighting equipment. So far, no casualties have been reported. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. And moving on, Brazil's Rio has set a new thermal sensation record after a neighborhood on the west side, Guaratiba, recorded 62.3 Celsius of temperatures on Sunday. Guaratiba is prone to high temperatures due to its proximity to the ocean and warm northerly winds hitting the area. This is the highest thermal sensation recorded since the Rio Alert system began taking measurements in 2014. Residents flocked to beaches and pools to try to ease the heat, while others said sometimes there is not enough water to drink amid the high temperatures. And the overflowing of the Baudo River has affected thousands in northwestern Colombia. Colombia's Disaster Risk Management Unit starts an operational response team to assist affected communities. Inhabitants of the Choco administrative region gets battered by flood water. Local authorities reported damaged houses and crops. And the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change to mark 30 years since it came into effect in 1992. The UNFCCC summit was the first step in addressing the climate change problem. As of 2020, the UNFCCC has 197 signatory parties. United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is an international treaty signed in 1992 with a goal to help countries cope with the impacts of climate change. And in Nepal, the 25th edition of the Flora Expo 2024 in capital Kathmandu concluded on Sunday. 73 stalls, including 3 landscaping stalls, attracted plant lovers from across the Himalayan nation. The 4-day-long expo showcased many popular imported flowers from the Netherlands, West Africa and Japan, along with indigenous Himalaya flora species. Nepal produces some 450 species of flowers and it does business for more than 3 billion annually. And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. 9 rail coaches of Bijoy Express derailed in Kamila, Bangladesh. Several people were reportedly injured. Several train services have been stopped after the incident. According to eyewitnesses, some coaches of the train were scattered from the line after the accident. Lava flows from a volcano in southwest Iceland for the 4th time since December. Authorities have warned for eruption was imminent on the south of Iceland's capital, Reykjavik. The eruption began on Saturday evening, sending fountains of molten rock soaring from a roughly 3-kilometer-long fissure. Thousands of people lined the streets of Dublin on Sunday to mark the annual St. Patrick's Day parade. About 500,000 spectators thronged the parade to watch street performers hailing from Ireland and across the world. St. Patrick's Day observes the demise of the patron saint of Ireland. The day has evolved into a celebration of Irish culture with parades, music, dancing and drinking with a wild lot of green. Some wearing tutus and ballet slippers, ballet enthusiasts filled Mexico City main square for a massive dance class. Attendance was free for the hundreds of dancers of various age groups who practiced plies and cambres while holding to bars instead installed for the event. The massive ballet class is the first of its kind in the city. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Indian Army and Seychelles Defence Forces begin their 10th edition of Joint Military Exercise Lamithia 2024 on Monday. And one of the biggest events showcasing the startup ecosystem of India's Startup Mahakumbh kickstarts on Monday here in New Delhi. And 33rd Uttar Pradesh State Kayaking Canoeing Championship underway in Boat Club in northern India's Kanpur city. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Lipakshi Khurana, and time now for a quick recap of the headlines. Vladimir Putin wins Russian presidential polls for record fifth term, says ready for talks on French proposal for a Ukraine ceasefire during the Olympics. Commenting on Navalny's death for first time, Putin says he supported prisoner exchange for him. Israel and Hamas are expected to resume stalled ceasefire talks in Qatar, even as Netanyahu remains adamant on going ahead with Rafah assault plan. Campaigning picks up for India's general elections. PM Modi campaigns in southern states of the country. Election Commission asked political parties to refrain from personal attacks. And in tennis, Alcaraz beats Medvedev to win second straight Indian Wells title. The Indian women's singles, Swiatek crushes Sakari to win second title. And for more, Disha Nishova tells us from Moscow. Well, Disha, early results show Putin winning some 80% of the votes, the highest ever result in Russia's post-Soviet history, and him winning the sixth time.
That's right. We understand at this moment that almost all of the ballots have been counted by the Central Election Commission, and the Russian President Vladimir Putin is securing yet another term in office by the landslide victory. Now, speaking at his headquarters in Moscow's Gostinny Dvor following the preliminary result publication, he said that these numbers indicate the trust that Russian people place in him. He also said it was obviously important for him now in the upcoming 6 years to implement everything that has been envisaged, to put forward all of the plans that have been announced. He also made a lot of reassurances suggesting that everything that has been promised will be fulfilled. Nothing he promises cannot be fulfilled. He said he had made a promise to himself that he wouldn't promise anything that he cannot achieve. So we understand to this moment that the other candidates have admitted that they have not managed to win this election. But again, you have to remember that the result of this election has all this time been a foregone conclusion. There have been no doubts about the outcome. The big question was how high the turnout would be and how many votes the president will garner. So speaking of the turnout, it has exceeded 70%. That was the projected target before the election started. And obviously, the very fact that so many people came to the polling stations or cast their ballots online is yet another thing that the Russian authorities will later be using, saying that the ongoing course which Russia is taking on many directions, including on Ukraine, is supported by the vast majority of Russians.
All right, the results were a foregone conclusion, as you said. Disha, also, as you just mentioned, Putin has also said that he was ready for talks on French proposal for a Ukraine ceasefire during the Olympics. How will that come into picture?
Well, that's right. President Vladimir Putin has once again reiterated Russia's position, saying that Moscow has never ruled out the opportunity of the negotiations. This possibility is still on the table. However, it is a big question, whom should Moscow be talking to when it comes to Ukraine? Because it is Ukraine that, according to Moscow, has all this time been walking out of the possibility of negotiations, banning them at the legislative level. We also have President Putin saying that this so-called sanitary zone will have to be created on the Ukrainian territories to make sure that the attacks by the Ukrainian military do not reach the Russian Federation. This is yet another thing that we've already heard from him, speaking about this sanitary zone, so that the Russian forces will have the upper hand in the territories that are close to the Russian border and make sure that the Russian border is safe. But once again, he has reiterated this probably after Ukraine stopped up its attacks on the election week against the Russian regions, and several people were killed as a result of those attacks, especially in the border region of Belgorod.
All right. Thank you so much, Disha, for that information from there. And moving on, campaigning picks up as India prepares to hold the world's largest elections. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will campaign in southern states of the country on Monday. Meanwhile, the Election Commission has asked the political parties to refrain from personal attacks.
As India prepares for general elections, it is important to understand the country's current political scenario. There are two main players in the fray. On the one side is the National Democratic Alliance led by incumbent Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Bharatiya Janata Party. Challenging the NDA is the India Alliance or Indian National Developmental Inclusive Alliance, which was formed in 2023. While the NDA comprises nearly 40 mostly regional parties, the India Alliance has over 20 opposition parties, including the Congress and Samajwadi Party. The 2024 polls will be a test of new coalitions. The formation of the India Alliance also marked the end of the Congress-led United Progressive Alliance. Let's take a look at how the existing and former alliances performed in the last general elections that were held in 2019. A total of 542 constituencies went to polls. The NDA won 353 seats, out of which 303 seats were backed by the BJP alone. The UPA won 91 seats, out of which the Congress backed 52, while 98 seats went to other parties and independent candidates. Coming back to the present time, in the North Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, which has the highest number of parliamentary seats, the Congress and SP have struck a seat-sharing deal. Of the total 80 seats, the Congress will field its candidates in 17 constituencies, while SP and other parties of the alliance will contest from 63 constituencies. However, the opposition India Alliance has been struggling to keep its flock together. In another jolt to the India Alliance, Bihar State's incumbent Chief Minister, Janata Dal United Chief Nitish Kumar returned to the NDA. In the 2024 polls, Prime Minister Modi will be aiming for a third consecutive term. The India Alliance, however, has not floated a PM candidate as yet. Apart from the battleground states, including UP, Bihar and Maharashtra, elections will also be closely watched in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. This is the first general election after the abrogation of Article 370, which granted special status to the erstwhile state. J&K was also bifurcated into two union territories, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Coming to poll issues and promises, PM Modi has vowed to make India the world's third largest economy. Also, recently inaugurated Ram Temple is expected to feature prominently in the BJP's campaigns. In 2019, building the temple was among the party's key promises. As for the opposition, the Congress decided to organize a national nationwide march called Bharat Jodo Nyay Yatra, or India Unity and Justice March, to garner public support. From issues to campaigning, elections in India are multifaceted. But first and foremost, they are a celebration of democracy which sees voters from all walks of life choose their representatives. Bureau Report, DD India.
An Indian Army and Seychelles Defence Forces begin their 10th edition of Joint Military Exercise L'Amitié 2024 on Monday. The 10-day joint exercise will be conducted at Seychelles. 45 personnel each from the Gorkha Rifles of the Indian Army and Seychelles Defence Forces will participate in their exercise. The aim of the exercise is to enhance interoperability in sub-conventional operations in semi-urban environment under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter on Peacekeeping Operations. It will enhance cooperation and interoperability between both the sides during peacekeeping operations. It will also build and promote bilateral military relations in addition to exchanging skills, experiences and good practices between both armies. And the largest celebration of Indian startups, Startup Mahakumbh, begins on Monday in New Delhi. The event aims to connect Indian startups with inventors such as VCs, angel investors and family offices, as well as potential corporate partners. More than 1,000 startups and investors are expected to take part in the event. Delegations from more than 10 countries and 5,000 future entrepreneurs will participate over the span of 3 days. The event also features sector-focused pavilions, including AI, agri-tech, deep tech and climate technology. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. The Fly 91 Airlines is commencing its flight service from Monday in a phased manner. Earlier, Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia, along with Goa Chief Minister Pramod Sawant, inaugurated regional airline Fly 91 and flagged off its medium flight between Goa and Lakshadweep on 12th of March. A massive wildfire is engulfed the Zabarwan mountain range in India's Jammu and Kashmir on early hours of Monday. The Jammu and Kashmir's fire department rushed to the spot to control the fire and minimize the damage. 33rd Uttar Pradesh State Kayaking Canoeing Championship commenced in Boat Club in northern India's Kanpur city on Sunday. District Magistrate says 11 teams are participating in the championship, and we aim to promote environmental conservation and increase awareness towards voting in the upcoming general election. More than 17,000 tulip bulbs brighten up and ready to welcome the tourist in Highland Park located in Kur in Jammu and Kashmir. Locals say earlier tulips were only seen in Srinagar, but now tulips are now also planted in Kur as well. Highland Park aims to attract tourists to Kur and boost tourism in the region. And still to come in DD India News Hour. Global ride-share giant Uber will pay $178 million to settle a long-running dispute with Australian taxi operators. The Royal Challengers Bangalore wins the Women Premier League 2024 title with an 8-wicket victory over Delhi Capitals. India's Festival of Colours commenced with fervour and enthusiasm in Mathura.
We just don't bring you the news as it unfolds. We get to the heart of the matter.
We don't just present facts. We demystify complex social, political and economic events.
We break stories that shape the world's present and future because you deserve the truth.
I am Tanvi Taneja from New Delhi.
I'm Ollie Barrett from London.
I'm Nick Harper from Washington, D.C.
Join us on DD India Global Monday to Friday at these times.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Lepakshi Khuranan. On to some business news now. The European Union announced $8.06 billion funding package and an upgraded relationship with Egypt, part of a push to stem migrant flows to Europe that has been criticized by rights groups. The agreement, which lifts the European Union's relationship with Egypt, was announced as a delegation of leaders visited Cairo. It is designed to boost cooperation in areas including renewable energy, trade and security, while delivering grants, loans and other funding over the next 3 years to support Egypt's faltering economy. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen headed a delegation meeting President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in Cairo on Sunday that also includes the Italian, Greek, Austrian and Belgian Prime Ministers and the Cypriot President. Well, Uber has agreed to pay $178 million to Australian taxi and hire car drivers, operators and license holders to compensate them for losing income and license values when the rideshare giant moved into the Australian market. The settlement is the fifth largest in Australian history and one of the most successful class actions against the rideshare giant. The class action suit was filed in 2019 in the Supreme Court of Victoria State on behalf of more than 8,000 taxi and hire car owners and drivers, accusing Uber of breaking laws requiring taxis and hire cars to be licensed. According to the lawsuit, Uber's 2012 arrival in the market took revenue from licensed taxi drivers while destroying the value of the licenses they had paid for. Uber had, however, said it never knowingly broke the law.
Well, today, Maurice Blackburn is very proud to announce that we have secured a $271.8 million settlement in the Uber class action. If approved by the court, this will be the fifth highest class action settlement in Australian legal history, which puts beyond any doubt that we have held Uber to account. This case has succeeded where so many others have failed. Cases in Victoria, Queensland and Western Australia against state governments all ran and failed. This is a day that we're all very proud of and a tremendous outcome for group members.
Great. It's been a 5-year battle and pretty much the taxi industry was decimated through the illegal proceedings of Uber, and today it can go down as a win and as an example to the rest of the world what can be done.
And prices of homes put up for sale in Britain have risen to maximum in nearly a year. London witnesses the biggest increase in demands of home sales. Property website shows a hike in prices as residential properties rose by 1.5% in last 4 weeks, marking highest 4-week increase in last 10 months. Sales prices jumped by 13% annually. Also, Pakistan is planning to make a formal bailout package request to the International Monetary Fund under the extended fund policy. Islamabad is likely to seek a package of over $8 billion during the upcoming spring meetings of the IMF, scheduled to be held in Washington, D.C. from April 15th to 20th. Earlier, the Pakistan government informed the IMF not to allocate an additional budget for the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Islamabad has said that it will not be setting aside extra funds to clear the outstanding dues of Chinese power plants. Meanwhile, the IMF has raised concerns about the effectiveness of Pakistan's effort to curb electricity theft. And Asian shares firmed on Monday as Chinese data surprised on the upside for once, while investors look to navigate a minefield of central bank meetings this week that could see the end of free money in Japan and a slower glide path for US rate cuts. Beijing reported industrial output climbed an annual 7% over January and February, while retail sales rose 5.5% on a year earlier. But real estate remained a worry as property investment fell 9% on the year, underlining the case for further policy support. Central banks in the United States, Japan, UK, Sweden, Switzerland, Australia, Brazil and Mexico all meet, and while most are expected to hold steady, there is plenty of scope for surprises. Tuesday could see the end of an era as the Bank of Japan is now widely tipped to end 8 years of negative interest rates and seize or amend its yield curve control policy. Markets also assume the BOJ will hike at a snail's pace and have a rate of 0.27% priced in by December, compared with the current minus 0.1%. Japan's Nikkei bounced 0.8%, having shed 2.4% last week. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan eased 0.1% after dipping 0.7% last week. Also, oil prices have had a better run after the International Energy Agency raised its view on 2024 oil demand. While you're watching DD India News Hour, time now for some sports news. Iga Swiatek beat Maria Sakkari 6-4, 6-0 in the Indian Wells final on Sunday to claim the women's single title for a second time in California desert. In a rematch of the 2022 final, world number 1 Swiatek came out firing, building a 3-0 lead. Swiatek, who did not drop a set all tournament, dominated the second, crushing a running backhand for a 3-0 lead and then breaking serve for 4-0 as the outmatched Greek began to fade. Swiatek is now 19-4 in her career finals and 8-2 at the WTA 1000 level. The 22-year-old earned her 20th match win of the year, which leads the WTA tour. Meanwhile, in men's singles, Carlos Alcaraz successfully defended his Indian Wells crown with a 7-6, 6-1 win over Daniil Medvedev in the finals later on Sunday. In another rematch of last year's final, second seed Alcaraz smacked 25 winners to Medvedev's 11 and was especially effective against his opponent's second serves. The two-time major champion was stung on the forehead when a swarm of bees invaded the court on Thursday, kept his number 2 ranking by ending Jannik Sinner's 19-match winning streak in the semis and slayed the big serving fourth seed Medvedev in the finals. And moving on to soccer now, Manchester United produced a stunning comeback to beat Liverpool 4-3 in an epic FA Cup quarter-final on Sunday. Amad Diallo practically blew the roof off Old Trafford when he netted the winner in the 121st minute after Marcus Rashford equalised 8 minutes earlier. Manchester United, 12 times FA Cup winner, will now face second-tier side Coventry City in the FA Cup semi-finals next month. United's rival and FA Cup holders Manchester City will face Chelsea in the other semi-final at Wembley next month. Manchester United manager Erik ten Hag hopes it will also be the catalyst to turn around their Premier League fortunes.
I think the first 35 minutes we show again that I've said more lately. The future of this team is very bright. There's a huge potential. Now we have to get it out and we have to get the consistency in. But from January on, we are already in a very good run. We got results in. And today, the first 35 minutes was very pleasing to see, watch this football. And then, of course, when you see it all over, I said after the game, it was really fun to be part in this game. We returned, we showed resilience and determination to win this game.
Well, the Royal Challengers Bangalore have managed to finally add a title to their cabinet with a spectacular win over the Delhi Capitals on Sunday at the Arun Jaitley Stadium in Delhi. Meg Lanning's-led Delhi Capitals won the toss and opted to bat first for the team, but RCB spinners put on a show to bundle out Delhi Capitals for 113 in 18.3 overs. DC started well, racing away to 64 for 0 before Sophie Molinex turned the game around with a 3-wicket over. RCB made easy work of their 114-run chase against DC to lift their maiden WPL title. Shriyanka edged Molinex and Asha Siobhana to win the purple cap, ending the tournament with 13 wickets in 8 matches. Meanwhile, Perry finished as the orange cap winner, beating Meg Lanning to the prize. An 8-day Cape Epic mountain bike race began near Cape Town in South Africa on Sunday, covering a distance of 617 kilometers with 16,500 meters of climbing. It began with the 2 rider teams racing over a 26-kilometer prologue around the Lawrenceford wine estate. The women's section was won by Anne Terpstra of the Netherlands and Swiss Nicole Kohler of the Ghost Factory Racing team. In the men's event, Nino Schurter of Switzerland and Denmark's Sebastian Finney, riding for the World Bicycle Relief Team, won by 51 seconds. Monday's opening stage is an 88-kilometer loop around Soronsberg to the northeast of Cape Town. Covering a distance of 617 kilometers with 16,500 meters of climbing, the event concludes in Stellenbosch on coming Sunday. And in India's Mathura, the enchanting festival of Holi commenced with fervour and enthusiasm. The renowned Rangotsav 2024 kicked off on a Sunday, marked by the delightful tradition of Laddu Holi. Thousands of devotees gathered to partake in this festive occasion, tossing laddus in the air as a symbol of celebration and devotion. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Lipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.